Wild Talents, by Charles Hoyfort, Chapter 32d. It was traveling far, going to trouble and expense to maintain the shine of a purity, the polish of which was threatened by no more than a youngster, of whom most of the world had never heard before. What I pick up is that there must have been an alarm that was no ordinary alarm, somewhere. I pick up that at tests in Detroit, in Henderson's presence, his motors worked, that in New York, not in his presence, his motors did not work. Then came the denouement, by which most stories of exposed impostors end up, or are said to end up. Said Dr. Huxtetter, dramatically, I suppose, inasmuch as he was much worked up over all this, he had discovered that concealed in one of the motors was a carbon pencil battery. Just about so, in the literature of taboo and almost all stories of doings that are alarming, there is no chance of a comeback from the exposed impostor. He is shown sneaking off stage in confusion and defeat. But some readers are having a glimmer of what I mean by taking so much material from the newspapers. They get statements from exposed impostors. They ridicule and belittle and publish much that is one-sided, but they do not give the chance for the comeback. Came back Henderson. That Dr. Huxtetter was quite right in his accusation, but only insofar as it applied to an incident of several years before. In his early experiments, Henderson, having no assurance of the good faith of visitors, had stuck into his motor various devices to lead them away from the real idea I was working on. But in the tests at Selfridge Field there had been no such leads, and there had been no means of concealment in motors that mechanics employed by Major Lanphier had made. 2 weeks later, Henderson dropped out of the newspapers. Perhaps a manufacturer of ordinary motors bought him off. But he dropped out by way of a strange story. It is strange to me, because I recall the small claims that were made for the motor, alleged power not sufficient to harm anybody, only enough to run a sewing machine, or to light lamps with 220 volts. New York Herald Tribune, March 10, 1928, that Lester J. Henderson, the Pittsburgh inventor of the miracle motor, was a patient in the Emergency Hospital, Washington, District of Columbia. It is said that, in the office of a patent attorney, he was demonstrating his fuel-less motor, when a bolt estimated at 2000 volts shot from it, and temporarily paralyzed him. It was Henderson's statement that his motor derived force from this Earth's magnetic field. It is probable that, if the motor was driven by his own magic, he would, even if he knew this, attribute it to something else. It is likely that spiritualistic mediums, or a few of them, have occult powers of their own, but they attribute them to spirits. Probably some stage magicians have occult powers, but in a traditional fear of prosecutions of witchcraft, they feel that it is safer to say that a hand is quicker than the eye. Divine healers and founders of religions have been careful to explain that their talents were not their own,